The wind howled across the frozen surface of Kelrath Prime, carrying ice crystals that could cut through metal. Deep beneath the moon's surface, in a chamber carved from solid ice, hundreds of beings from across the galaxy watched a screen showing the Arctic hunting simulation. Kang Minho pressed his face closer to the viewing window. As a human studying alien biology at the Federation Academy, he had seen many strange things, but nothing prepared him for watching the mighty thermal warrior Blazkor stumble through the snow, his 4 arms shaking with cold and fear. "How long has he been in there?" Minho asked the female human sitting next to him. Lee Soman worked as the simulation's record keeper. Her job was to track every attempt, every failure, every moment of terror. 3 hours and 26 minutes, Soman replied, checking her data pad. "That's actually better than average. Most participants hit the emergency beacon within 2 hours." On the screen, Blazkor's thermal vision flickered. The thermal species could see heat signatures from miles away. They were natural hunters on their home world. But here, in this simulation, something was hunting him. Something that gave off no heat at all. A shadow moved between the ice formations. It looked like smoke, but smoke that could think and plan. Blazkor fired his plasma weapon at it, but the blast passed right through. The shadow circled him, getting closer. "What is that thing?" Minho whispered. "Void Stalker," Soman said. "They exist partly in our world and partly in another dimension. The Frostborn created them as the ultimate test. You can't fight what you can't touch." Blazkor's breathing became rapid and panicked. The shadow whispered something that made the warrior drop his weapon and scream. His massive form collapsed to his knees in the snow. With shaking hands, he activated his emergency beacon. The simulation ended. Medical teams rushed in to collect Blazkor, who kept mumbling about seeing his homeworld burning and his family dying. The Void Stalker had shown him his worst fears made real. "Another failure," announced the simulation master, a tall alien with blue skin and 6 eyes. "That brings our total to 847 attempts, 0 completions. The record stands." The crowd of observers began to leave. Some shook their heads in disappointment. Others looked relieved that they had not volunteered. The Arctic hunting simulation remained unbeaten. Minho studied the statistics on Soman's screen. Thermal, warriors, apex hunters, crystal beings, shadow walkers, every species in the galaxy had tried. The strongest, fastest, and smartest beings alive had entered the simulation. All had failed. "The trial lasts 7 days," Soman explained as they walked through the observation tunnels. "Participants must survive in temperatures that drop to -60 degrees. They must hunt and kill 3 void stalkers while avoiding the other predators in the simulation. And they must do it all while dealing with weather that changes without warning. They pass trophy cases filled with gear left behind by failed participants, advanced weapons, environmental suits, tracking devices, all useless against the simulation's challenges." "Why is it so impossible?" Minho asked. Soman stopped at a case containing a broken plasma rifle. "Because the Frostborn didn't design it to test strength or speed. They designed it to test something deeper, something about the mind and spirit. The Void Stalkers don't just hunt your body. They hunt your fears, your doubts, your worst memories." An apex hunter walked past them. These beings stood 8 feet tall and could track a single drop of blood across an entire continent. This one's arm was in a healing cast, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone who had seen too much. "Krax tried the simulation last month," Soman whispered. "Lasted 4 days. When we found him, he was trying to claw his own eyes out. Said the Void Stalkers made him watch his hunting pack die over and over again." They reached the main hall, where species representatives discussed the simulation. The conversations were always the same. How could they modify the trial? Could technology overcome what nature could not? Should they abandon the simulation entirely? The Frostborn created this as the ultimate hunter's trial. said a crystal being, its voice ringing like chimes. Perhaps it proves that some challenges are meant to remain unbeaten. A shadow walker disagreed. We have not tried every combination of abilities. Perhaps a team approach would work better. Teams have been tried, replied an apex hunter. The void stalkers simply divide and conquer. Fear spreads faster in groups. Minho listened to the debate with growing interest. Every species had tried. Their best warriors, their most advanced technology, their most clever strategies. Yet none had succeeded. Has humanity ever attempted the trial? He asked during a pause in the conversation. The hall fell silent. Several aliens looked at him with what might have been amusement. Others seemed confused, as if they had forgotten humans existed. Humans? The crystal being's chimes sounded like laughter. Why would they try? No offense, but your species lacks the basic requirements for survival. Agreed, said the Shadow Walker. Humans have no natural weapons, poor temperature regulation, and limited sensory abilities. They would not last 1 hour. An elderly Frostborn stepped forward. His ice-blue skin was covered in ritual scars, and his breath formed clouds in the warm air. The trial was created to find the ultimate predator. Humans are prey animals. They have survived by hiding and running, not by hunting. Minho felt his face grow warm with embarrassment, but he pressed on. What if being different is exactly what's needed? Everyone who has tried thinks like a predator. Maybe that's the problem. The aliens exchanged glances. The idea seemed to puzzle them. The simulation cannot be solved by thinking like prey, the Frostborn said firmly. It requires courage, strength, and hunting instinct. Humans possess none of these in sufficient measure. Soman touched Minho's arm gently. Let's go, she said quietly. They've made up their minds. As they left the hall, Minho could hear the aliens returning to their usual debates about technology and tactics. None of them seemed interested in considering a completely different approach. Back in the observation chamber, Soman pulled up footage from previous attempts. They watched warriors with claws like swords, beings who could phase through solid matter, and hunters who could see across multiple dimensions. All had fallen to the same fate. Look at their eyes, Soman said, pointing to the screen. Right, before they activate the emergency beacon. They all have the same expression. Complete hopelessness. Minho studied the faces of the failed participants, thermal warriors, apex hunters, crystal beings. Despite their different features, they all shared that same look of absolute defeat. The Void Stalkers show them something, he realized, something that breaks their will to fight. Exactly. And that's why the simulation has never been completed. You can train a body to endure cold and hunger. You can equip a warrior with the best weapons and armor. But you can't prepare a mind for facing its deepest fears made real. The observation chamber grew quiet, except for the distant wind outside. Minho stared at the empty simulation chamber on the screen. Somewhere in that frozen wasteland, 3 Void Stalkers waited for the next challenger. They had been waiting for 300 years, and they had never been disappointed. Maybe the aliens are right, Minho said finally. Maybe some challenges are impossible. But even as he said the words, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. Every species that had tried the simulation shared certain traits. They were all natural predators. They all relied on strength or speed or advanced senses, and they all approached problems the same way. What if the solution required thinking like something completely different? What if the key to beating the Arctic hunting simulation wasn't being the best predator, but being something else entirely? The question followed him as he left Kelrath Prime, returning to his studies at the Federation Academy. But he carried with him the memory of those failed warriors and their look of absolute defeat. Somewhere in the galaxy, there had to be someone who could think differently enough to succeed where everyone else had failed. 3 months after watching Blazkor's failure, Kang Min-ho received an unexpected message at the Federation Academy. Someone had registered for the Arctic hunting simulation. Someone human. Min-ho rushed back to Kelrath Prime with a mix of excitement and dread. He found Lee Soman in her office, staring at a registration form with obvious confusion. "His name is Park Jun-ho," she said, sliding the form across her desk. "Age 32, occupation listed as wilderness guide from a place called Siberia 7. Min-ho scanned the basic information. No military training, no advanced education, no special certifications. Just a man who guided people through frozen wilderness on a frontier world. "This has to be a mistake," Min-ho said. "Or maybe a joke. Did someone dare him to do this?" Soman shook her head. "I asked him 3 times if he was serious. He just nodded and asked when he could start. Oh, and he had one strange question." "What?" "He wanted to know if anyone had ever tried entering the simulation during a storm." They found Junho in the preparation chamber, examining a simple collection of gear. While other species brought advanced weapons and high-tech survival equipment, his supplies looked almost primitive. Park Junho was shorter than most humans, with weathered skin and calm, dark eyes. His hands were scarred from years of outdoor work, and he moved with the quiet confidence of someone comfortable in harsh environments. Dr. Kim Nara, the chief medical officer, was trying to explain the psychological dangers. "The previous participants have suffered severe trauma," she said. "Some never recovered. Are you sure you understand what you're volunteering for?" "I understand," Junho replied in a soft voice. "Cold places have cold things. Some of them are dangerous." His simple answer seemed to frustrate Dr. Kim. "These aren't just dangerous animals. The Void Stalkers exist partially outside our reality. They feed on fear and despair. They make you see things that aren't real but feel completely true." Junho nodded patiently. "Like mountain spirits back home. We have stories about them." Commander Ryu Teho entered the chamber, his military uniform crisp and formal. As the Federation Oversight Committee leader, he had watched too many brave warriors break under the simulation's pressure. "Mr. Park, I must advise against this attempt," he said. "Species with natural cold resistance and enhanced senses have failed catastrophically. Humans simply lack the physical capabilities required for survival." Junho looked up from organizing his gear. "Has anyone tried going into the storms?" The question puzzled everyone in the room. Commander Ryu frowned. "The storms are the most dangerous part of the simulation. Visibility drops to 0. Temperatures fall to levels that would kill most beings instantly, and the wind can knock down trees. Every rational participant seeks shelter during storms. But has anyone tried going into them on purpose?" Dr. Kim checked her records. "No. The survival protocols specifically recommend finding shelter and waiting out severe weather." "Why would anyone willingly enter a blizzard?" Junho didn't answer directly. Instead, he continued sorting his equipment. No high-tech environmental suit, just layers of simple clothing. No energy weapons, just a basic knife. No advanced sensors, just rope, fishing line, and what looked like metal scraps. Word of the humans' registration spread quickly through the facility. Aliens came to stare at him with mixtures of curiosity and disbelief. Some made jokes about how quickly he would fail. Others seemed genuinely concerned for his safety. A group of apex hunters studied him like a puzzle they couldn't solve. "He has no claws," one observed. "No natural armor, no enhanced senses. How does he expect to hunt anything?" "Maybe he doesn't plan to hunt," suggested another. "Maybe he'll just hide for 7 days." Impossible. The simulation requires killing 3 Void Stalkers. You cannot hide from beings that exist in multiple dimensions. Dr. Shin Yuna, the Federation's leading expert on Void Stalkers, arrived to conduct a final interview. She had studied every previous attempt, analyzing what went wrong and why the creatures were so effective. "The Void Stalkers are apex predators in their home dimension," she explained to Junho. "They hunt by inducing terror in their prey. show you your worst fears, your deepest regrets, your most painful memories. This psychological attack usually paralyzes the victim before the physical hunt even begins. Junho listened carefully. What do they look like? They appear as shadows that move independently of any light source. They can phase in and out of our reality at will. When they're hunting, they whisper things that drive their targets to despair. Do they have a scent? Dr. Shin blinked. A scent? We've never studied that aspect. The focus has always been on their psychological attacks and dimensional abilities. Everything that lives has a scent, Junho said. Even spirits in the stories. The conversation was interrupted by an announcement. The simulation would begin in 2 hours, during Kelrath Prime's calm season. Even the calmest weather on the frozen moon was harsh enough to challenge most species. Junho finished his preparations, while alien observers filled the viewing chamber. Some came to witness what they expected to be the fastest failure in simulation history. Others hoped to see something unexpected. Technician Oh Hyun ran final checks on the monitoring equipment. All sensors are active, he reported. We'll be able to track his vital signs, location, and activity throughout the trial. Lee Soman reviewed the simulation parameters. Temperature will start at -40 degrees and drop from there. The Void Stalkers are positioned in sectors 7, 12, and 15. Weather systems are primed for random activation. Commander, Ryu made one final attempt to dissuade Junho. There's no shame in changing your mind. The emergency beacon will transport you out instantly if you activate it. But once you enter, you'll face challenges that have broken warriors from every species in the galaxy. Junho shouldered his simple pack and walked toward the simulation entrance. How often do the storms come? Randomly, Dr. Kim replied. Sometimes multiple storms per day, sometimes none for days. The weather is completely unpredictable. Good, Junho said, which confused everyone who heard it. The massive doors of the simulation chamber opened, revealing a landscape of ice and snow stretching to the horizon. The temperature dropped immediately, and frost began forming on the observation windows. Junho stepped inside without hesitation. He paused for a moment, breathing deeply of the frigid air, then began walking across the snow. His movements were steady and purposeful, showing no sign of the panic that usually gripped participants within minutes. Vital signs are stable, Oh Hyun reported. Heart rate slightly elevated but within normal range. No signs of hypothermia yet. The observers watched in fascination as Junho did something none of them expected. Instead of seeking immediate shelter or beginning to hunt, he started studying the environment itself. He examined the snow, the ice formations, the way the wind moved across the landscape. What is he doing? Asked a crystal being. Learning, Soman realized. He's not thinking like a hunter or a warrior. He's thinking like a guide. For the first hour, Junho simply walked and observed. He seemed to be mapping the terrain in his mind, noting landmarks and weather patterns. When he finally stopped, it was to build a small shelter, not for protection, but as a base camp. His construction technique was unlike anything the aliens had seen. Instead of fighting against the environment, he worked with it. He used the natural wind patterns to ventilate his shelter and positioned it to take advantage of reflected sunlight. Interesting approach, Dr. Shin murmured. He's not trying to dominate the environment. He's adapting to it. As the second hour began, the weather system generated the simulation's first challenge, a minor snow squall that reduced visibility and dropped the temperature 10 degrees. Every previous participant had immediately sought shelter. Junho did the opposite. He left his camp and walked directly into the storm. The monitoring equipment struggled to track him through the blowing snow. Signal is intermittent, Oh Hyun reported. He's moving, but I can't determine his exact position. This is suicide, Commander Ryu said. No one can survive exposed in those conditions. But when the storm passed an hour later, Junho emerged from it unharmed. More than that, he seemed energized by the experience. He had learned something during his walk in the blizzard, though. The observers couldn't guess what. "He's not following any known survival protocol," Dr. Kim observed. "Everything he's doing goes against standard procedure." Junho spent the rest of the day continuing his strange routine. He walked through the simulation, always staying in motion, always observing. He built no permanent shelter, lit no fires, and showed no interest in the high-tech equipment scattered throughout the environment from previous attempts. As night fell, bringing temperatures that would freeze blood in exposed veins, the observers expected to see Junho finally seek proper shelter. Instead, he did something that made everyone in the viewing chamber hold their breath. He began tracking something in the snow, following footprints that existed in multiple dimensions, marks that showed where void stalkers had passed between realities. "He's found their trail," Dr. Shin whispered. "After 8 hours, he's already located one of them." But Junho didn't attack or prepare for battle. He simply followed the tracks until they led to a formation of ice pillars, then made camp nearby. Day 2 of the Arctic hunting simulation began with Park Junho doing something that made the alien observers question their understanding of survival itself. Instead of eating the emergency rations in his pack, he was fishing through a hole in the ice. "The simulation provides food sources," Dr. Kim Nara said, watching the monitors with confusion. "Why would he waste energy hunting for fish when he could use preserved supplies?" Lee Solman studied the readings from Junho's location. "Look at his calorie expenditure. It's actually lower than yesterday. He's not wasting energy. He's using it differently." Through the observation screens, they watched Junho pull a silver fish from the freezing water. But instead of eating it immediately, he studied it carefully. He examined its scales, its fins, the way its body was adapted for extreme cold. "He's learning from everything," Technician Oh Hyun realized. "The environment, the weather patterns, even the local wildlife. He's treating the simulation like a classroom." Junho prepared the fish with practiced skill, but saved half of it. The observers couldn't understand why until later, when they saw him use the leftover fish as bait, not for more fishing, but placed strategically around his camp. "Bait for what?" Commander Ryu asked. "The Void Stalkers don't eat physical food." Dr. Shin Yuna leaned forward in her chair. "Maybe that's not what he's trying to attract." As the day progressed, Junho's bait drew several small Arctic creatures. He watched them carefully, noting their behavior, their fear responses, the way they moved when they sensed danger. When they suddenly fled in terror, all running in the same direction, Junho smiled. "He's using them as an early warning system," Salmon breathed. "The local animals can sense the Void Stalkers before our equipment can detect them." Junho packed up his camp and followed the fleeing animals. His tracking skills led him through a maze of ice canyons where the wind howled like voices in pain. Here, in this natural echo chamber, he stopped and began the strangest preparation any of them had witnessed. He started making noise, not random noise, but specific sounds. He whistled, hummed, and called out in different pitches. The ice canyons caught his voice and threw it back in complex patterns. Junho listened carefully to each echo, mapping the hidden spaces around him. "Sound mapping," Minho whispered. "He's using echolocation like a bat." "Impossible," said a visiting apex hunter. "Human hearing isn't developed enough for that level of acoustic analysis." But the evidence was clear on the monitors. Junho was building a three-dimensional map of his surroundings using only sound. When his calls didn't return as expected, he knew something was absorbing or distorting them, something that existed partially outside normal space. The first Void Stalker appeared at sunset on day 2. It emerged from the ice like smoke given form, a shadow that moved independently of any light source. Previous participants had described The moment of first contact as overwhelming terror, a flood of despair that paralyzed body and mind. Junho's reaction was different. His heart rate increased, but he didn't flee or freeze. Instead, he did something that stunned everyone watching. He sat down in the snow and closed his eyes. "What is he doing?" Dr. Kim asked. "The creature is right there." The Void Stalker circled Junho like a shark sensing blood. It began its psychological attack, whispering things that should have driven him to madness. But Junho remained seated, breathing slowly and evenly. "His brain activity is unusual," Oh Hyun reported, checking the medical sensors. "It's almost like he's meditating." The Void Stalker grew frustrated with its unresponsive prey. It intensified its assault, showing Junho visions of failure, death, and despair. But the human simply sat in the snow, listening to something else entirely. "He's ignoring the visions," Dr. Shin realized. But how? The psychological attacks work on the subconscious level. They bypass rational thought. What the observers couldn't see was what Junho was actually experiencing. Yes, the Void Stalker was showing him terrible things, but Junho had learned to recognize them as false by comparing them to something real. The sound of the wind, the feeling of snow under his body, the rhythm of his own breathing. When the Void Stalker finally gave up its psychological assault and prepared to attack physically, Junho opened his eyes. In that moment, as the creature materialized fully in normal space to strike, he moved. The knife appeared in his hand with practiced speed. But he didn't attack where the Void Stalker was. He struck where it was going to be. His blade found the creature's physical form just as it fully entered their dimension. The Void Stalker shrieked, a sound that existed in multiple realities at once. It flickered between dimensions, wounded but not dead. Before it could escape, Junho did something that changed everything. He began to sing, not a battle song or a cry of victory, but a simple melody he had learned as a child. The song echoed through the ice canyons, and the echoes formed a pattern that seemed to trap the Void Stalker in normal space. "The acoustic mapping," Somin gasped. "He's using sound to interfere with its dimensional phasing." The wounded Void Stalker found itself unable to escape to its home dimension. Trapped in normal space, it was vulnerable. Junho struck again, and the creature dissolved into shadow and silence. 1 down, 2 to go. The observation chamber erupted in excited chatter. No one had ever killed a Void Stalker so efficiently. Most participants who managed to wound one were immediately overwhelmed by the creature's revenge attacks. But Junho seemed to understand something about the creatures that had escaped everyone else. They weren't just interdimensional predators, they were part of a connected system. Killing one would draw the attention of the others. Day 3 brought the simulation's most dangerous weather yet. A massive blizzard formed on the horizon, the kind of storm that had driven previous participants to despair. The temperature would drop to -60 degrees, winds would reach hurricane strength, and visibility would become 0. Every rational survival protocol called for finding shelter and waiting out the storm. Junho watched the approaching blizzard with obvious interest, then began stripping off his outer layers of clothing. "He's lost his mind," Commander Ryu said. "No one can survive exposed in those conditions." Dr. Kim was already reaching for the emergency controls. "I'm aborting the simulation. He'll die of exposure in minutes." "Wait," Somin said, grabbing her hand. "Look at his vital signs. He's not panicking. His breathing is controlled, his heart rate is steady. He knows something we don't." Junho reduced his clothing to a basic layer, then did the unthinkable. He walked directly into the heart of the storm. The monitoring equipment immediately began losing signal. The supernatural blizzard created interference that their sensors couldn't penetrate. For long minutes, they had no idea if Junho was alive or dead. "Signal completely lost," Oh Hyun reported. "The storm is generating some kind of dimensional distortion that's blocking our readings. Emergency protocols require immediate extraction," Commander Ryu said. reaching for the controls. "No," said a new voice. An elderly Frostborn had entered the observation chamber. His ice-blue skin was marked with the ritual scars of a simulation designer. "Let him continue. He has understood something that we did not expect." "Understood what?" Dr. Shin asked. The Frostborn's 6 eyes glittered with ancient knowledge. "That the storms are not obstacles to avoid, they are doors to open. Inside the blizzard, where no sensors could follow, Junho was experiencing something unprecedented. The supernatural storm wasn't just weather, it was a dimensional phenomenon. The same energy that allowed void stalkers to phase between realities was what powered the most intense blizzards. By entering the storm, Junho had entered the spaces between worlds. Here, in the chaos between dimensions, he could see the remaining void stalkers as they truly were. Not mysterious shadow beings, but creatures following predictable patterns in their native environment. The storm raged for 6 hours. When it finally passed, the monitoring equipment came back online. Junho's signal appeared first as a faint blip, then strengthened as the interference cleared. He was alive. More than alive. He was moving with purpose through areas of the simulation that shouldn't have been accessible. Somehow, the storm had carried him to places that existed only when dimensional barriers collapsed. "Where is he?" Oh Hyun asked, studying the readings. "Those coordinates don't match any part of the simulation map." "He's in the spaces between," the Frostborn said quietly. "The places that exist only during storms. We designed them as impossible areas, meant to be glimpsed but never reached." When Junho finally emerged from the unmapped regions, he carried with him proof of his journey, the tracking device of a void stalker taken from the creature's home dimension. The second kill of his hunt. But more importantly, he had learned the secret that would make the third kill possible. The storms weren't random weather events. They were scheduled dimensional openings. And the biggest storm of all was coming on day 7. The storm that would give him access to the simulation's final secret, the place where all 3 void stalkers were truly vulnerable. The alien observers watched in growing amazement as this unremarkable human prepared for challenges that had broken their greatest warriors. Day by day, he was proving that sometimes the most dangerous approach was the one that looked impossible. The real test was still ahead. Day 4 began with Park Junho doing something that terrified the alien observers more than any void stalker could. He was hunting the third creature not with weapons or technology, but with patience and understanding. The remaining void stalker had learned from the deaths of its companions. It no longer hunted Junho directly. Instead, it began a campaign of psychological warfare that had broken every previous participant who reached this stage. "It's adapting," Dr. Shin Yuna observed, watching the readings spike across her instruments. "The creature is using tactics we've never seen before." The attacks started small. Junho would find his equipment moved during the night. His fish would disappear from his traps. His carefully built shelters would collapse for no apparent reason. The Void Stalker was making him doubt his own memory, his own senses. Most participants at this stage began showing signs of paranoia and breakdown. They started making mistakes, wasting energy on phantom threats, jumping at shadows that might or might not be real. Junho's response was different. Each time something strange happened, he would sit quietly and examine the evidence. When his fish disappeared, he studied the lack of tracks in the snow. When his shelter collapsed, he checked the structural points for signs of interdimensional interference. He's treating it like a puzzle, Lee Soman realized. The psychological attacks aren't breaking him down, they're giving him information. Technician Oh Hyun monitored Junho's brain activity with growing amazement. His stress levels are actually decreasing. Most participants are completely paranoid by day 4. He's becoming calmer. The reason became clear when Junho began leaving. Deliberate gifts for the Void Stalker. Pieces of fish, small items from his pack, even drops of his own blood. He placed them in specific locations and waited to see what happened. "He's communicating with it," Dr. Shin breathed. "No one has ever tried to communicate with a void stalker before." The creature, confused by this unexpected behavior, began making mistakes. It revealed itself partially to investigate Junho's offerings. Each appearance gave him more information about its movement patterns, its dimensional phasing cycles, and its vulnerabilities. Admiral Wang Minyuk arrived at the observation facility on day 5, drawn by reports of the unprecedented attempt. As the highest-ranking military officer in this sector, he had seen battles across a dozen star systems. But watching a single human outsmart an interdimensional predator was beyond his experience. "Explain to me how he's still alive," the Admiral demanded. Commander Ryu showed him the accumulated data. "Every other participant has tried to fight the Void Stalkers as enemies. Junho is studying them as part of the environment. He's not trying to defeat them. He's trying to understand them." Dr. Choi Jiwon, a human psychologist who had been monitoring the feeds, offered her analysis. "The Void Stalkers prey on fear and desperation, but Junho isn't showing either emotion in sufficient quantity to sustain their attacks. His curiosity is stronger than his fear." On day 5, the real revelation came. Junho had been mapping the Void Stalker's appearances, and he discovered something that changed everything. The creature wasn't randomly hunting him. It was following a pattern, moving between specific dimensional anchor points in the simulation. "It's not free to roam anywhere," Junho said to himself, unaware that the observers could hear him through the monitoring system. "It's tied to certain places, certain times, like a guard on patrol." This insight led to the most dangerous gamble any participant had ever attempted. Junho began deliberately triggering the simulation's most hazardous events. He approached unstable ice formations, ventured into areas marked as extreme danger, and activated weather systems that should have killed him instantly. "He's using the simulation's own defenses against the Void Stalker," Somin gasped. "Every time he triggers a danger event, the creature has to respond according to its programmed behavior patterns. The Void Stalker found itself forced to protect the simulation's integrity even while hunting its primary target. This created conflicts in its behavioral programming that Junho exploited ruthlessly. By day 6, the remaining Void Stalker was showing signs of distress that the observers had never seen before. Its dimensional phasing became erratic. Its psychological attacks lost focus. The predator was becoming prey to a human who thought like no hunter in galactic history. "This is unprecedented," Admiral Wang said, reviewing the tactical analysis. "He's conducting asymmetric warfare against an enemy that exists partially outside our reality, and he's winning." The true test came on the 6th night, when the Void Stalker abandoned all subtlety and launched a full psychological assault. It showed Junho every fear, every doubt, every moment of pain from his entire life. The attack was so intense that the monitoring equipment registered dimensional distortions around his location. Previous participants had described this final assault as like having their minds torn apart and rebuilt as instruments of terror. Even the bravest warriors broke completely under this ultimate attack. Junho's vital signs spiked dangerously high as the assault began. The observers prepared for another failure, another broken participant requiring emergency extraction. But something unexpected happened. Instead of breaking down, Junho began laughing. "He's laughing," Oh Hyun reported in disbelief. "His stress readings are dropping rapidly. How is that possible?" The answer came when Junho spoke aloud, his voice carrying across the simulation through the monitoring system. "You're showing me my memories," he said calmly. "But you're getting them wrong." The Void Stalker had made a critical error. In trying to torture Junho with his worst memories, it had revealed that it didn't truly understand human psychology. It showed him fears that weren't quite right, pain that wasn't quite accurate, and despair that didn't quite match his real experiences. The psychological attacks work by making you believe the false memories are real, Dr. Choi explained. But Junho has spent his life in harsh environments where misremembering details means death. His memory is too accurate to be fooled by approximations. The Void Stalker's most powerful weapon had become useless. Worse, its failed attack had given Junho the final piece of information he needed. By trying to read his mind, the creature had revealed its own thought patterns, its own fears, its own vulnerabilities. Day 7 arrived with the largest storm in the simulation's 300-year history. The dimensional barriers began breaking down completely as hurricane-force winds carried ice crystals that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. "This is it," the elderly Frostborn said, watching the storm build. "The final test. If he can survive this storm and complete his hunt, he will have achieved something we thought impossible." But the alien observers were about to learn that Junho had never intended to survive the storm. He had been waiting for it, planning for it, preparing to use it as his final weapon. As the great storm approached, Junho stood at the exact center of the simulation and did something that had never been attempted. He began calling to the Void Stalker, challenging it to face him in the dimensional chaos where all the rules would change. The creature, driven by instincts it couldn't control, answered his call. As the storm reached its peak intensity, predator and prey faced each other in a space where the normal laws of physics no longer applied. The monitoring equipment failed completely as dimensional barriers collapsed. For 12 hours, the observers had no idea what was happening in the heart of the storm. They could only wait and hope that when the chaos cleared, they would still have a participant to monitor. When the storm finally passed, the silence in. The observation chamber was complete. Every sensor was focused on the simulation area, waiting for any sign of life. The signal, when it came, was weak but steady. Park Junho emerged from the dimensional chaos carrying proof of his third and final kill. But more than that, he had discovered something about the simulation that would change how the galaxy viewed both humanity and the nature of true strength. The Arctic hunting simulation had been completed for the first time in its history, and it had been completed by a species that everyone considered too weak to matter. The silence in the observation chamber stretched for long minutes after Park Junho's signal returned. Technician Oh Hyun stared at his instruments, unable to believe what they were telling him. "All 3 tracking devices are accounted for," he reported in a whisper. "The Void Stalkers they're gone. He actually did it." Lee Soman felt tears in her eyes as she watched the lone figure walking across the simulation's frozen landscape. After 847 failures, over 3 centuries, a human had completed the impossible trial. "Vital signs are stable," Dr. Kim Nara announced, her voice filled with wonder. "No signs of psychological trauma, no physical breakdown. He's exhausted but coherent." Admiral Wang Min-hyuk stood slowly, his military bearing unable to hide his amazement. "In 40 years of service, I have never seen anything like this. How did he do what our greatest warriors could not?" The elderly Frostborn who had designed the simulation moved closer to the viewing screen. His 6 eyes studied Junho with something approaching reverence. "He understood what we had forgotten," the ancient being said. "The trial was never meant to test strength or speed or advanced technology. It was meant to find someone who could see order within chaos itself." Captain Yu Jinsol of the Human Diplomatic Corps rushed into the chamber, having received urgent reports about the completion. As one of only 12 humans in the upper levels of Federation government, she understood the enormous implications of what had just happened. "The entire galaxy will want to know how he succeeded," she said breathlessly. "This changes everything about how other species view humanity." Dr. Shin Yuna was studying the final readings from the storm. "Look at these dimensional measurements," she said. During the peak of the storm, reality itself was breaking down. The normal laws of physics stopped working. Yet somehow he not only survived, but used the chaos to his advantage. When Junho finally reached the simulation exit, he was met by a crowd of alien observers who stared at him with mixtures of awe, confusion, and disbelief. This unremarkable human had accomplished what the galaxy's apex predators could not. Commander. Ryu Taiho stepped forward to conduct the formal debriefing. Mr. Park, you have achieved something unprecedented. Can you explain your methods? Junho looked tired but satisfied. His simple clothes were torn and stained. His gear was mostly used up, but his eyes remained clear and calm. The storms weren't obstacles, he said simply. They were doors. You just had to know how to open them. But how did you survive the psychological attacks? Dr. Shin asked. The Void Stalkers broke the minds of our strongest warriors. They showed me false memories, Junho replied. But when you spend your life in places where a single mistake means death, you learn to trust only what you know for certain. Their lies were close to the truth, but not close enough. Dr. Choi Ji-won leaned forward. What about the final confrontation? Our instruments failed completely during the storm. What happened in there? Junho was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. The Void Stalkers aren't really predators, he said finally. They're more like guardians. They were testing me, not trying to kill me. The simulation was designed to find someone who could think differently enough to see that. The Frostborn nodded slowly. Our ancestors created this trial during the war with the Chaos entities. We needed to find warriors who could fight enemies that existed outside normal reality. But over the centuries, we forgot the true purpose. We began testing for the wrong qualities. What qualities were you really testing for? Captain Yu asked. The ability to find patterns in randomness, to see connections where others see only confusion, to remain curious instead of fearful when faced with the unknown. The Frostborn looked directly at Junho. Humanity possesses these traits more strongly than any species we have encountered. Word of Junho's success spread through the Federation's communication networks within hours. On every world, beings who had dismissed humans as weak and irrelevant were forced to reconsider their assumptions. Kang Minho, who had watched the entire trial from the beginning, felt a profound sense of pride in his species. We always knew humans were adaptable, he said to Soman. But this proves we're adaptable in ways that matter more than physical strength. The implications went far beyond a single trial. Military strategists began studying human survival techniques. Scientists requested access to human psychological profiles. Diplomats who had ignored humanity suddenly wanted to establish closer relationships. But perhaps the most significant change came from the Frostborn themselves. Their representative approached Captain Yu with a formal request that shocked the Federation government. We wish to establish a permanent alliance with humanity, the ancient being announced. For 300 years we believed no species could match our understanding of chaos and order. We were wrong. Humans see patterns we cannot perceive. The request sent ripples through galactic politics. The Frostborn were one of the oldest and most respected species in the Federation. Their recognition of humanity as equals changed everything. In the days that followed, researchers from across the galaxy came to study what made Junho's success possible. They analyzed his techniques, his thought patterns, his physiological responses to stress. What they found surprised everyone. Humans don't just adapt to harsh environments, Dr. Shin reported to the Federation Science Council. They actively seek out patterns and opportunities within hostile conditions. Where other species see chaos to be avoided, humans see problems to be solved. The Arctic hunting simulation remained on Kelrath Prime, but its purpose changed. Instead of an impossible trial that proved alien superiority, it became a teaching tool. Young humans came to learn from Junho's example, while aliens came to understand why humanity had spread across the galaxy despite lacking natural weapons or armor. but Junho himself remained remarkably unchanged by his newfound fame. When offered positions in the Federation military or prestigious research facilities, he politely declined. He preferred to return to his work as a wilderness guide, helping others navigate the dangerous places of the galaxy. "The frontier worlds still need guides," he explained to those who asked why he wasn't pursuing greater opportunities. "And I like the work. Every dangerous place teaches you something new." The Void Stalkers, meanwhile, had not been destroyed. As Junho suspected, they were guardians rather than predators. With their true purpose restored, they became allies in humanity's exploration of dimensional anomalies and chaos physics. Years later, when young humans asked Junho how he had succeeded where others failed, his answer was always the same. "I didn't try to fight the chaos or avoid it. I tried to understand it. Once you understand something, it's not scary anymore. It's just another part of the pattern." The galaxy learned an important lesson from the Arctic hunting simulation. Strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the most powerful ability is knowing how to see opportunity where others see only obstacles. Humanity's reputation was forever changed. No longer seen as weak prey animals, they were recognized as the species that could find hope in hopeless places and patterns in perfect chaos. In a galaxy full of predators and warriors, humans had proven that sometimes the greatest strength is the willingness to walk into the storm instead of hiding from it. The title of Stormwalker, once used mockingly by those who doubted Junho's chances, became a term of respect throughout the Federation. It represented the uniquely human ability to thrive in conditions that would break other species, not through superior strength or speed, but through superior understanding. And somewhere on the frozen moon of Kelrath Prime, the Arctic hunting simulation waited for the next challenger. But now it carried a different message than before. Instead of proving that some challenges were impossible, it proved that with the right perspective, even the most impossible challenges could become opportunities for growth. The storm that had once been humanity's greatest weakness had become their greatest strength, and the galaxy would never underestimate the species that could dance with chaos and find music in the wind.